sprinters go towards the last kilometre, Hinault knows now that that yellow jersey is his for keeps. The fifth and final time I think he'll ever win this Tour de France, and he's safe.
2,567 miles and the best overall lapsed time for this man. The closest finish in a decade. Bernard Hinault completing it in 113 hours, 24 minutes, 23 seconds.
Welcome back to the Cycling Iceberg in podcast series, everyone. Thank you so much for the support on the first episodes. I really appreciate it. And it's been 40 years since that audio clip that you just heard. That was Bernard Hinault crossing the line in 1985 to win his fifth and final Tour de France. The commentator made the prediction that this would be the final Tour win of Hinault, and he was right. A year later, he came back, trying to fend off his teammate Greg LeMond, but eventually had to settle for second place. He retired at the end of that season. It also marks the final time a French rider won the Tour de France. 40 years is by far the longest that the home nation has ever needed to wait to win the biggest race of the country. Today, on their national day, 14 juillet, instead of focusing on all the successes they've had on that day, we'll look at a generation of new Bernard Hinaults, riders who in modern history at some point have all been labelled the next French Tour winner, but for one reason or the other couldn't fully fulfill the potential that the French media had hoped for them. As said, 40 years is by far the longest time the home country has had a drought in terms of Tour de France GC winners. Their previous negative record stood at 12 years between 1911 and 1923. Note that in these years the Tour was cancelled several times because of the First World War. Like most countries, the French press is super eager to find a new talent that they can name the new XXX. Belgium has been looking for the new Merck since 1975. The Netherlands is desperate for a new Zoetemelk since 1980. France, perhaps the birthplace of chauvinism, has been absolutely no exception to this trend. They've been looking for the Bernard Hinault for a long time, and intriguingly, they came the closest to finding a successor already in 1987. I told the story about this tour in the first episode of this series, so listen that if you want to know more details, but Jean-François Bernard raced for La Vie Claire, the old team of Hinault. He competed for the Tour de France win despite his modest age of 25. Bernard obliterated the opposition on the mountain time trial up the Ventoux, gaining 2 minutes on his biggest rivals. He led the GC by 2.5 minutes, but suffered a puncture the following day. When he came back in the peloton, he was out of position when others attacked through a feed zone. He lost the yellow jersey and stood third on the podium after 25 stages. Bernard was labelled as a worthy successor of Hinault by the French press. However, he turned out to be a one-hit wonder. In 1988, he led the Giro, but crashed badly in a poorly lit tunnel during the epic snow stage of the Gavia. Several injuries held him back for the remainder of his career. He would never finish in the top 10 of the Tour again, and instead became a domestique. Of course, there was the 1989 Tour, in which Laurent Fignon came super close to winning. However, he wasn't really the successor of Hinault. He was roughly of the same generation and won his 2 Tour de France's before Hinault won his final one. Later there were riders as Christophe Moreau, Richard Virenque, Christophe Rinero and Luc Leblanc, but nobody came close to the Tour win, and they all weren't really labelled as super big future Tour de France winner prospect level talents. The French drought was especially tough in the 2000s. Between 2001 and 2010, no French rider finished in the top 5 of the Tour. There were even years without French riders in the top 10 of GC, something unthinkable for nearly a century. However, in the early 2010s, a new generation of riders gave the French fans hope. First, there was Romain Sicard. In 2009, the French Basque rider won the Tour de l'Avenir. This is the Tour de France for U23 riders. That same year he became U23 world champion. He signed a deal with Euskaltel-Euskadi and was named as potential next Tour de France winner by Bernard Hinault himself. However, Sicard's potential never materialized. A combination of injuries, crashes, and perhaps also a dose of early peaking meant he would never finish in the top 10 of a Grand Tour. He, instead, mostly raced as a domestique and baroudeur type of rider. Sicard quickly disappeared to the background of the French minds because in 2011 a new talent rose to the top in the Tour. While Thomas Voeckler came somewhat close to a surprise Tour win for Europcar, his younger teammate Pierre Rolland impressed as well. Rolland was already known as a hyper-aggressive rider. He'd won the KOM jersey in the Dauphiné a few years prior. He worked relentlessly for Voeckler, climbing with real panache, often coming out of the saddle. Lance Armstrong referred to him as a rock star during that race. In the final mountain stage, it became clear that Voeckler wasn't going to win the Tour. So, Rolland was finally set free by his team. On Alpe d'Huez, he beat Alberto Contador to take the stage win. He finished 10th in GC and won the white jersey for Best Young Rider. He actively needed to oppress comparisons to Hinault. In 2012, the expectations were high for the now 26-year-old Rolland. The first week of the Tour was however horrible for him. Due to a crash, a bad prologue and horrible TT, he was already 10 minutes down in GC. Through breakaways, he managed to fight his way back into the general classification. He won the 11th stage from the break and sat 9th in the general classification. He would improve this position by 1 in the remainder of the race, finishing 8th at the end. There was, however, also a new French revelation that Tour.
Thibaut Pinot qui est un grimpeur, lui souvent il se dresse sur les pédales, se met en danseuse, pourcentage très important sur ce col de la Croix.
Tu vas le gagner, mon! Allez, le 10 sur le peloton, allez! Merci Monsieur Madio.
Il demande le col d'Ossard à Marc Madio.
D'être parfois excessif, mais cette image est extraordinaire. Thibaut Pinot pour son premier tour remporte sa première victoire sur le Tour de France. À Port-en-Puy, il entre dans l'histoire du Tour de France.
The 22-year-old debutant went into the breakaway in stage 8, racing for FDJ. He had previously lost time in the prologue and in stage 6 when he crashed. With 15 kilometers to go, Pinot left his final breakaway compatriot behind on the Col de la Croix. Despite the headwind, he managed to fend off a group of GC favourites, as you just heard. He received vocal support from Marc Madiot, crossed the line to win the stage, and finished 10th in GC come Paris. He became the youngest rider since Raymond Impany in 1947 to do so. From there, the careers of Rolland and Pinot took vastly different trajectories. Rolland never really made a next step in his career. His 2013 season was disappointing, and although he managed to bounce back with a 4th place in the 2014 Giro, he never became a serious contender for podiums in the Grand Tours. He finished 11th in the 2014 Tour and managed 10th a year later. That was a sign for him to give up hunting GCs and switching to stage hunting. He never managed to win another Tour stage, although he did win a Giro stage. Pinot too had a bad 2013 season. He admitted to having a fear of speed, hampering severely on downhill sections. Over the winter, he drove in sports cars and underwent special trainings to deal with this. This led to a bounce back in 2014. There were several GC riders that crashed out of the race early on, but Pinot wasn't one of them. He stayed upright and finished 3rd in the overall. He also won the white jersey. With super grandpa Jean-Christophe Perrault, who was 37 at the time, finishing 2nd, it was the first time since 1984 2 French riders stood on the Tour podium in Paris. Pinot became extremely loved in France. He spoke with his heart on the tongue, attacked with style, and showed pure grinta. It certainly helped he raced for FDJ, the most French of teams. It was undeniable that Pinot was extremely talented, but tactical errors and crashes cost him throughout his career. Certainly, luck wasn't always on his side either. In the 2015 Tour, he crashed early on and dropped out of GC contention. He did win stage 20 on Alpe d'Huez, getting some consolence out of the Tour. A year later, he crashed out of the race in the KOM jersey. Struggling with the status and reputation coming with being the French super talent, the humble Pinot decided to race the Giro in 2017. He was in contention for the overall win, but weak TT performances ultimately saw him finish 4th. After an anonymous tour, he decided to skip the race altogether in 2018. That year, dehydration in the final mountain stage cost him a podium finish in the Giro. He recovered at the end of the season to win Il Lombardia, his first and only monument. More matured, Pinot returned to the Tour in 2019. The Frenchman lost time in crosswinds early on, and his time trial wasn't great either. However, that year his preparation was completely dialed, and he was the strongest climber in the race. He won on the Tourmalet, moving into third in GC. However, just as the race headed to its final 2 mountain stages, he had to withdraw with a torn quadriceps. He left the race in tears, knowing his best opportunity to win the Tour had been squandered. After the 2019 Tour, injuries kept haunting Pinot. He crashed in the first stage of the 2020 Tour, had a back injury, which meant he missed most of the 2021 season. Luckily, he could retire with some pride in 2023. In his final season, he finished 5th in the Giro and won the KOM jersey. He raced aggressively in the Tour, but didn't manage to win a stage. For most of the years, Pinot wasn't the only French talent being hyped. In the 2014 Tour, Romain Bardet broke through in the shadow of Perrault and Pinot. He briefly held 3rd overall, eventually dropping to 6th. Bardet was a vastly different type of rider than Pinot. While both were attacking, Bardet loved downhills. He descended fearlessly, but was also slightly more punchy than Pinot on the steep climbs. He dropped out of GC contention in 2015, but did win a stage. A year later, Bardet placed a downhill attack in stage 19 to win the stage. He went from 6th in GC to 2nd. While he was no match for eventual winner Chris Froome, there was hope that he could do so later on in his career. Bardet came closest to winning the Tour in 2017. While his climbing abilities were good, his time trial was too weak to ever win a Grand Tour. He placed 3rd and never managed a better classification again. He finished 6th in 2018 and won the KOM jersey after dropping out in 2019. Bardet focused on other Grand Tours but had a brief resurgence in the 2022 Tour. He finished 2nd on the Granon but couldn't replicate such great performances. He finished 7th, although he later got promoted to 6th after Nairo Quintana got scrapped from the results. He mainly hunted stages in the remainder of his career, winning the opening stage of his final Tour last year. He wore the yellow jersey for 1 day. With Bardet now retired, Warren Barguil was the last remaining rider of the trident of New Bernard Hinault. After winning 2 stages in the 2013 Vuelta, racing for Argo Shimano, Barguil too was labelled a huge prospect. Barguil, dubbed Wawa by the French, targeted general classification results but couldn't materialise on his 8th place in the 2014 Vuelta. He didn't finish in the top 10 of the 2015 or 2016 Tour, despite making a big goal out of this. Interestingly enough, he did best in the year he didn't target a general classification.
Alberto Contador à la corde, Warren Barguil à l'extérieur avec plus de vitesse que l'Espagnol peut-être. Warren Barguil en tête, une victoire française le 14 juillet ici à Foix. Nairo Quintana qui tente de revenir, qui ne va pas y parvenir. Warren Barguil vainqueur à Foix avec le maillot de meilleur grimpeur.
In 2017, Barguil focused on winning stages in the Tour. After a 2nd place in stage 9, he won stage 13 on 14 juillet. Perhaps that's a silver lining at the end of this. After all the French failed GC prospects, filled of course with the most respect, at least some success on their national holiday. Later, he also won the 18th stage on the Izoard. He finished 10th in GC, a result he replicated more anonymously in 2019. Barguil also won the KOM jersey in 2017. With the last French Tour win now 40 years behind us, the French media has continued on its relentless quest to find their next superstar. After a brief moment of belief in David Gaudu, they've now placed their hopes on Lenny Martinez and Paul Seixas. We will soon find out if this generation of French talents progresses differently than those before them.